in the lab with Esten, and then we'll talk a little bit about bare metal and edge. We'll give everyone a minute or two to come in. We got some new setup going. We got
Yeah.
ArgoCon in the background. Like I'll plug some ArgoCon at the end. It's coming up not this weekend, but next weekend, right?
Yeah, you
Like
got
so it'll be
shiny
next
lights. We
weekend.
we got KubeCon coming up in October too.
Yep. KubeCon, ArgoCon, all the cons coming up. I think everyone's starting to go to things again. So I think I won't be at ArgoCon, but I will be at KubeCon. We will have some people at ArgoCon that you can reach out and talk to. So
Mm-hmm.
you'll be at KubeCon?
I'll be at KubeCon.
Okay.
I'm looking
Did
forward
I
to
say it
being
wrong?
man in the booth.
KubeCon.
This is my first time at KubeCon as a vendor.
Oh, really? You've
Yeah,
always gone as someone who's like
I've
looking
always gone
for
as
new
someone
things?
as the vendee.
Oh, nice. All right. So I guess I think we've given everybody a minute or two. Like if anyone has any questions or anything, feel free to post them in chat or post them as a comment. I'm gonna give like another minute or two.
Yeah,
Just to get some people
we
coming
can
in. All
shoot the
right.
breeze a little bit
So
longer.
you'll be at the booth. You'll be at the booth at KubeCon.
Yep, I'll be doing some booth duty and maybe take in a couple of talks here and there, but my goal is to talk to people.
Submitted talks, but I mean it's hard to get
I
it's hard to
did.
get on the on the agenda, right? Like I think a bunch of us submitted some talks, but definitely hard. I don't think I've ever been accepted there yet. How many times you submitted this time and then last
I've
year?
submitted once to
Just once.
KubeCon so far.
Okay.
And yeah, I think the topic I was really interested in was Kubernetes TLS, and I
Gotcha.
think they felt that was covered enough. So
It's been covered. We've got like 20 videos on that. Not really 20, but all right. So let's go ahead and get started then. Let's go ahead and start talking about your lab environment. So I think the first question, well, let me introduce everybody. I'm Mike Petersen, technical marketing engineer at Platform 9. You can go ahead and introduce yourself if you want, or I can introduce
yep.
you.
So I'm Esten Rye. I'm a DevOps engineer on the operations team at Platform 9. So and I'm a avid home labber.
Awesome. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. Like a lot of the home lab stuff kind of applies to work lab and then bringing it to work. So it's a good place to mess around. So, okay. So what's new in the lab and have you picked up any new hardware? So what's different since the last time we talked about maybe a month and a half ago?
So, I mean, what's different since the last time I've done it is there hasn't been a whole lot of change in the lab lately. But I did get some new hardware that's coming. It should be coming next week sometime. But I've been really kind of wanting to move my focus to more bare metal Kubernetes and start experimenting with KubeVirt and some of the and more experiment more with Argo. And so part of that was like, well, I've got these 3 Dell R610 compute nodes, which have like 24 virtual threads, across two physical processors, and and we've got 192 gigs of RAM each in them, and probably like 4 terabytes worth of storage. And so I'm starting to look at like, how do I start bringing this and making it something I can manage? So and like,
I'll say
because I
that's
don't.
pretty beefy. That's a little bit bigger than
Yeah.
some of the stuff you might see in actual labs people are using, right? Like so what's the difference then I guess with that? So for home lab stuff, you're looking at like, what can I get? Can I get the biggest thing in the smallest amount of space compared to at the work lab? You're like, okay, let me get a bunch of things in case something fails.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get density, because it's not cheap to run a home lab. If you're running big iron servers like I am back there, you can see it. You can see it kind of. Let's see if I can get the. Yeah, so straight back there. If you look to the right of the old desktop that I have, through the window where the aquarium that came with the house was, you can see my 22U custom built rack. And I think you can see, yeah, you can see the monitor right up there.
Yeah, I can kind of see it.
Yeah, there's a little 4x3 monitor that I hand plug between the servers whenever I need to see the console.
So you got a VGA cable still, right? Is that the
Yeah, I
only
still got a
reason you have
VGA
one in the
cable.
house?
But yeah, it's been a wonderful little experimentation platform, because I've built. There have been a lot of things where I've built something on the lab that I've taken back and contributed to the work environment. So I learned something in my free time, and I'm like, this is cool. I want to use this at work. And so then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just take this stuff that I put on my GitHub repo, and I'm just going to reappropriate it to work.
So that's pretty cool. So you said you got new hardware coming in. Do you want to
Yep.
go into that a little bit more? So you talk about the hardware you have. So what's your next step? Like, what are you doing next? So right now you've got big beefy stuff. And you're running your controllers and stuff on that right now, right?
Yeah, so right now I'm running Proxmox as my virtualization software, and it's fine. It works great. I'm perfectly happy with it for the most part. No real big issues. And I've played with VMware ESXi and stuff like that, and I like that too. But like Proxmox was easier from a management standpoint for me because I didn't need all the bells and whistles of ESXi. But like as I start like looking at what I'm operating on my lab and like the areas of interest that I'm wanting to pursue, the Proxmox virtualization is not what I want to keep running on my lab. I want to move it all to be Kubernetes based. Start digging more into this bare metal focus where I can manage this. And so part of that is part of doing that is like, okay, how am I going to run my control plane?
Gotcha. Does the Proxmox limit you a little bit? Like, is it more opinionated and like what it lets you set up, or it makes things a little bit different
It
than you would if
doesn't
you
really
just?
limit me at all. Like
Okay,
I have a Docker container that I wrote that spins up an Ubuntu 2004 base image using Packer on Proxmox, and using that container, I then have automation that then applies the Ubuntu CIS level 2 server hardening standard, and gets me to within 7 findings of actually passing it completely, based on using the CIS cat light from the CIS, from the Center for Internet Security. So they provide an analyzer that I can then evaluate the automated portions of the standard and confirm that I am meeting what I say I'm meeting.
so you think you're more secure at home than you might have been in previous roles at other companies, or is that what you're trying to say? Like, most people are like, get it done. You need to fix this stuff. I've gone around and turned off SE Linux before, so
Yeah, as far as like one of the things that I'm very interested in, and both professionally and a little bit personally, is how do I meet compliance standards while still doing best practices, but also doing it from an automated perspective, right? I don't want to go in every year and collect compliance auditing information because that is the work of droids. I don't need to do the work of droids. I'm smarter than the droids. I want to do the work of the engineer. And so like I'm very interested in over engineering my system so that I can have robots collect all that information so that I can justify to an auditor that says, hey, yeah, I'm secure. No, I've
yeah,
I've ticked all these boxes and flags that the government and industry and trade groups want me to check because that's something that they want to pay me for. Um,
that's something good to do at home. Like, usually, I think often it's time, especially for me, like I'm avoiding doing anything super secure, but I guess you probably should be, right? Because it's something that's you're managing inside your network and stuff, and you want it to be
right.
secure.
Well,
Usually it's like, I need to get this done. But now you're like,
and yeah, I mean, it's like there's a ton of projects that I want to get done, but at the same time, the other aspect of it is that I don't always have time.
yeah,
Um, uh, and like I want to do it where I'm a one man shop, right? I'm the person who racks and stacks the hardware. I'm the person who installs the operating system. I'm the person who automates the installation of all the software, applies all the updates. Like if I'm gonna run a home lab, like, and have it be usable on a regular basis and serve production services to my family, like say our Minecraft server or a Plex server or a family website or a blog or something like that. I need to know that it's reliable and I need to be able to maintain it without having to cut into my 5-year-old's playtime with daddy.
yeah. So you're at KubeCon, right? Like in October, and stuff goes down. How are you getting in remote?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Most of my home lab is actually it's home lab. It's not exposed to the internet, largely because I
Gotcha.
haven't gone around and set up a WireGuard VPN yet for that. Part of, I think, this evolution is I want to drive more of my stuff to Kubernetes because it's just easier to once you get Kubernetes up and hardened and configured appropriately, it's just easier from a deployment aspect, managing layer 7 DNS, managing um, you know availability, being able to shut a host down and bring it back up again. um,
Was your say, is there another Mac in the house? Or are you doing like a screen share and then you're hopping on from remote from your Mac, or what are you doing?
I have
You're on the
exactly one.
phone.
I have exactly one Macintosh in my entire
The one for
house,
work, yeah.
and
Hey,
it's the
Plex
one
isn't
that
working. Fix it.
and it's the one issued from work. And outside of that, it's mostly Ubuntu 2004, and then
Gotcha.
I have a couple of Windows machines, because you need a Windows machine in this world, as much as I hate to admit it.
Yeah, it's good for gaming. I mean, that's what I use it for. But I mean, with the Linux subsystem, it's a lot better than it was even like 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, I
when
know.
you guys
I ran Windows subsystem for Linux for like 4 or 5 years on my Windows issued laptop at the last company I worked for.
Yeah, it's better than having to install what, PuTTY, or
PuTTY wasn't bad. It's not as awesome as having a local client that you can execute against.
yeah. All right, so you're ordering some new hardware. Let's move on to the next thing. Are you working on automation for anything at home? Like, is everything starting with automation? So you talked a little bit about
Yeah.
security. What are you automating? What are you using? What tools?
So, I mean, again, I focus a lot on operating system automation. So trying to get I try to deploy everything as consistently as possible. So like I use Packer, I use Ansible, I use kubectl. I'm using Customize for most of my Kubernetes deployments. Actually, I've actually shifted from Helm to Customize a little bit, because I find it's actually that's not quite
Some
a
might fight
shift.
you on that. I've seen some that say they love it, some that just say, no, I'm just gonna keep using Helm.
I haven't quite shifted from Helm to Customize. It's more like I've found the happy middle, right? So like I still use Helm charts, but I use Customize to inject the values.yaml and to do any like high level changes on top of it.
So on a daily basis, what's the biggest difference between the two, would you say?
The biggest difference that I would say between them is, with Helm, you're focusing more on the Go templating language. So you've got a lot more. You're trying to generalize, and sometimes if you're just trying to get something up and running, I sometimes feel like you're generalizing prematurely. Because like if you just need to build something that's got like X number of values and a dependency, like there's a lot of boilerplate to get a an app of apps Helm chart put together that deploys everything. And then at the one of the other things that I found is that it's not as flexible. It wasn't as flexible for me when I was starting to try and play with Argo.
So say like Helm, like you're probably starting out by just creating something with all the values that you need. And then you go in and you replace those values and you use a configuration thing. Like that's the learning curve, right? Like you start
Right.
out with just creating a regular Helm chart, then you make them variables, then you have this config file. So with Customize, what's the difference? Is that it's just doing a diff on what you've got deployed versus what you want to change?
So Customize, essentially it's templating, except that it results in a single like in like a Kubernetes manifest file. So you're operating more from a perspective of I'm operating on raw Kubernetes manifests, which makes it a little bit more powerful, in my opinion, than Helm, because in Helm all of your manifests are kind of really built through the template, and if you don't have a value for configuring something and don't add the extra boilerplate around making that thing configurable, well, you're kind of SOL.
So what does that look like for a developer, right? Like for Helm, they would just like clone a repository, make some modifications to their configuration file, and then get it deployed off of that. So what happens with Customize? Customize, you're just doing a clone again, and then you're just modifying the actual YAML
Yeah,
directly.
so I put together kind of a repo that I was playing with, and like one of the things that I do, and I gotta pull this up so I can reference and make a good
Maybe we'll dive into it so we can actually see the technical stuff on a different stream too, if you want.
yeah,
Like we can kind of
yeah,
show
we can
off
do that.
longer form. That'll be awesome.
So if people are interested, they can head out to my personal GitHub repo and hit the
You're sending
CD
to me, I'll
home.
post it.
Yeah. Here I'll put this out here. It's
Make a little caption so everyone can see it in case they want to
yeah,
hop on.
so it's github.com/estenry/cd-homelab.
CD/HomeLab.
Yeah.
You want to send it to me? Send it to me on
Yeah, I'll
Slack real
send it
quick.
to you.
I'll post it.
I gotta open up Slack again.
Okay. So I don't post the wrong thing.
Give me 1 second here. There we go. Found it.
Esten's GitHub example.
Yeah, here we go.
It's freeform anyways. If anyone has questions and stuff. Well, you said it too for like the podcast later in case anyone wants to go to it.
Yeah.
So I'll read it out.
So I dropped the link there in Slack for you.
I got it. All right, let me post it. All right, so let me show it here in a second. That looks right.
Yeah.
GitHub.com/estenry/cd-homelab if you're interested in checking it out and you're listening to the audio.
Yeah. So kind of like at the top level, like since I'm running on a Mac or even on a Linux machine, like one of the things that irritates me the most about like going to a repo is like, what tools did you need to put this thing together, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that just drives me nuts when I go into a repo. I'm like, okay, I want to deploy this now, but I have to analyze your repo to figure out how I deploy this, right? So the first thing that I usually do in my repos is I create a brew file, especially if I'm using Homebrew for package management of my local dev machine, and I basically pull together all of the different components into that brew file.
So you're basically saying you're a Mac user, right?
I'm a Mac or Linux user. This will work on Linux too.
Yeah.
And it'll work on WSL as well, as long as you install it. But when the fun thing about this is I just say I do brew bundle and it installs everything. So I get my kubectl, I get customize, I get YQ, JQ, Helm, Cookie Cutter, which is a templating engine that I use for local templating for spinning up repos, small little repo snippets. I got the Argo CD CLI and the 1Password CLI because I use 1Password for my personal password management.
You're pretending that you make this easy for everyone else by doing that, but you're really making it easy for you when you have to come back and do it again, right?
Like this is as much so that I don't forget how I set up my environment as it is making it easier for some poor developer coming in behind me is like, hey, this looks cool. How do I use it?
You don't want to have like a 5,000 line like README so that they can get up to speed.
God, no. I want to have like a clearly defined sets of like, here, I need these 3 packages installed before I do anything else. I need to configure my Git stuff. I need to do install VS Code because and I want like these extensions installed, and like like one of the things that I've really I've found over the years of working in industry is that knowing how to set up your environment is critical, and being able to do it quickly. I mean, like, because
we're in a bubble too, because like I talked to like my cousin and stuff who's not as into this stuff, and he hasn't heard of VS Code, right? Like, so there's people out there, like he's an Oracle database admin. I was like, dude, VS Code, just try it out. He's like, oh, I just got plugins for everything. This is awesome, right? Like, you don't think about it, like outside of our little bubble, not everyone's even using VS Code. Like, I mean, obviously I use VI and stuff on terminal more, but now like VS Code for everything with SSH tunnels. That's all I do. I'm lazy.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I'm similar too. I use VS Code, and I find the extensions that make my workspace experience better, and like documenting those and knowing what they are, so that if my laptop gets stolen or my laptop dies and work issues me a new one, I can be productive very quickly.
So what theme are you using? Dracula, and why isn't it Dracula? Why are you using Dracula?
Oh, I think I'm using the
Solar
Dark
or something.
Just the default dark theme. It's good enough. Sometimes I use the Solarized theme. But it really just depends on like what's speaking to me at the moment that I'm installing it.
And are you bringing up terminal all the time when you're working on it? Like that's my default thing is having terminal up. Like I didn't know it existed at first, so I was sitting there like SSHing in and like making modifications on terminal, and then I was like, oh, I can just do terminal here.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I'll just have the default terminal there, but there's also sometimes where I actually prefer a separate terminal.
Gotcha.
because it gives me that context switch.
Especially if you have a smaller screen too, like you might have to do that. But if you
Oh yeah,
if you're
especially when you're
using a
doing a smaller
4K or
screen.
something,
I mean, like when I'm working just on the laptop, sitting in my lap, paying attention, kind of like half paying attention to what's going on in the room, but also half paying attention to what I'm coding,
yeah.
leads to some interesting results. But yeah, when I've got that smaller screen, the every inch of real estate to put code on is important. But like when
Yeah.
I've got it on when I'm running the 4Ks, I've got tons of room to throw that terminal at the bottom.
Yeah, you're not making it bigger, making it smaller, making it bigger, making it smaller, just to be able to read a little bit of
Right.
text that you have up there. Well, that's pretty cool. Let's go on to the next thing. So, I mean, you kind of answered the other one. We'll probably come back around
Well,
to it too.
you kind of wanted to
I
touch on.
interrupted. Yeah.
You kind of wanted to touch. We kind of went on a tangent, but you wanted to touch on like how does that look different in
The customized.
like
Yeah. Let's go
how does
back to it. You're
customized
bringing me
look
back.
different?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I do is I set up when I'm doing my Helm. It's a lot easier for me to set up an entire cluster using Customize
Gotcha.
than it is to do in Helm.
When you say easier, do you mean faster from start to finish and then easier to figure out like configurations for it? Right. Like, what do you mean by easier?
I mean by what I mean by easier is um, I find it easier to build up pieces and components while still being able to isolate things into their own specific namespaces than
Okay.
I do in Helm.
Gotcha.
Just because of the way Helm is designed to install all of its management objects into the same namespace as where you're deploying
Okay.
using secrets. And so, like one of the things that I was struggling with when I was starting to kind of move towards this app of apps type idea with um, Argo is I was actually running an older version of Argo and uh, where I didn't have access to modify the home cluster, like the cluster that's running Argo on, which is your
Okay.
database for all of your apps. Like if you don't have access to modify that, well, makes it a little bit more difficult.
So this is older version on platform 9 that you're
Yep,
talking about, and then
older
like so
version
it's
of
getting
platform 9.
updated. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where the updates bring us to on that. But
I'm sure we'll have more on that later.
yeah, I'm sure we will.
Come to ArgoCon, like we've got in the background, and learn about some
Mm,
of our new stuff. I can plug here's Arlon. So maybe
yeah,
I'll even post a little caption while you're talking about Customize.
yeah. But so like one of the things that I found like with Customize is it allowed me to kind of do a less sophisticated app of apps type pattern where I can have a master cluster template that I can then include sub apps into using Customize and have a really nice experience in including those apps. So like one of the things I could do in the base is in the base in the customization.yaml is I can say I want this I want this customized template, I want this customized template, I want this customized template, I want this one, I want this one. I can just list them in about 8 lines of YAML um, and get all of my dependencies installed for my ingress controller, cert manager, set up my Cloudflare cluster issuer, set up sealed secrets so that I can deliver encrypted platform secrets.
So
Uh,
I've barely touched. I've done Customize. Like I've looked into it, but I haven't used it. I'm more versed in Helm. So you're saying Customize. Are you still using like little variable tags in there, or you're using base YAML files, base manifests, and then you have like a dependencies file that says install all of these for my app,
well,
and then
and
you're
so
saying
this
like
is, and so you can do that. You can just use just raw YAML files, and then what you do is you do if you want to change it, you build overlays that basically do like a JSON patch format that you can say I want to change this value in this path in the manifest, and it gives you a very very robust, also very surgical way to change different pieces of the output manifest. And so one of the ways I use this is I leverage the best of both worlds.
say,
Is
wait a
that
minute, I gotta learn JSON now too. Is what you're telling me?
Just
I
gotta learn.
gotta know YAML and JSON. Come on.
Well, it's more of a, it's more specifically, if I can find where I dumped that information. Let's see here, not there.
Do I need to start writing in Go now too? Is that what's going on?
Always. Um, so like if you look at if you end up going into explore the repo and you look in the clusters folder under overlays, you'll see a couple of different clusters that I manage this way. And then it's the JSON, it's the patches JSON 6902 RFC, I think. I forget. I think it's RFC 6902 for using a patch format that you best specify your target of what you're trying to modify and what your path is, and it patches it customize takes that and patches it.
So customize will look at what it is, take your JSON information, and it'll translate to something that the Kube API can interact with. Gotcha.
The other fun thing is that it customizes built into the kubectl.
Okay.
So if you,
it's not like Helm, which is to be separate and outside of it.
Yeah. So like you don't even have you don't even have to download a separate binary to use customize, and that's so you can just do if you have a customized template, you can do kubectl apply -k and point it at the directory that holds your customized template, and it will just magically go and deploy.
So do you think this is where more people are kind of moving from Helm, and that's why, because it's just more, seems like it's supported by
Customize is actively supported by the Kubernetes SIG. I think it's SIG CLI.
That makes sense.
So it's built into, it's been built into kubectl, I think, for a few versions now.
Gotcha.
But like the fun thing that I do with this is that I can leverage the best of both worlds with Helm and customize. If there's a Helm template out, if there's a Helm chart out there that does 90% of what you need to do, and you only want to change like the 5% that the developer didn't bother to give you the things to go and touch, what you can do is you can actually specify a Helm inflation. It's called a Helm inflation generator, which will basically take the chart, the chart repo, the chart name, the version, and any values that you're going to pass into it, and it will hydrate the Kubernetes manifest locally on your machine. And then once it's done hydrating it, it then lets you apply customized modifications to it. Which,
so this is VMware physical or bare metal to virtual machine is what you're saying. This is a migration.
It's not. It's
just not that. I'm just messing with you.
Yeah. But I mean, what's fun about that is that I can use the existing Helm charts that are out there.
So it's easier to migrate over, is what you're saying, for people that are already using Helm all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even talking about migrating. I'm talking about living in both worlds.
Using both. Okay.
I mean, like, because there's no point in me rewriting the Ingress Engine and the Ingress Nginx Helm chart. It's a fantastic Helm chart.
Yeah, that's true.
But there's just a couple of things that I want to tweak or modify that are just easier to tweak or modify and customize.
So we should have called this one all about customize, I think. But that's interesting though. Like, I'm interested to know the difference. Like, I've had some friends talk about like, oh, I'm going to try customize, and they're like, well, are you going to do that? I'm just using Helm. Just use Helm 3, right? Like, it's good to go.
I mean,
and you've already built all my infrastructure on it. Yeah.
I started most of my Kubernetes development using Helm 3.
Yeah.
And it's still like, if I still like it as a tool. But as I've started exploring Customize and started exploring Argo, there's it's more declarative than it is imperative. In my, I mean, Helm is fairly declarative, but it's only declarative once it gets deployed to the cluster. It's all, I mean, it's interpreted up until you generate it, and that that's that. Like in here, I'm using I have to actually use the generate function of customize before I can pass it into kubectl. So customize just doesn't, that's a little bit different. I'm not saying that either tool is better.
Yeah.
which is why I end up using both. Is because
That's interesting that you can use both. I wasn't thinking about that. Like, it's not a hard migration over to the other tool. Like, that makes it a
yeah.
little bit better,
I mean,
especially if you
I'm
all
not
that
going to
stuff.
fight about like which tool is better.
Yeah.
They're both excellent tools, and when used in conjunction with each other, they're even more powerful.
So I'll plug two here. If anyone has any questions or comments or opinions on either two, let us know. You can comment in the chat, or you can comment on LinkedIn. So we're on Twitch and YouTube right now. So just put it in
Yeah,
there. I
and
should
if
be able to see
anybody
it.
thinks I'm full of hot air, please
Yeah.
tell me.
He's like, well, that's all wrong.
I'll pull my finger.
Yeah, so I'm not. You asked the question: VI versus Emacs, right, or versus
No, I mean,
Nano, but not same thing at all.
there's no question. It's VI.
Yeah. Well, it's VS Code now. I mean, I don't even use that, but
Exactly,
it's
it's VS
VI. Yeah.
Code. If you need a GUI, it's VS Code. If you need a text editor, it's VI.
I don't know how to get out of Nano half the time or Emacs, so I'm just like stuck there. So
I
I have
actually there's a flag on Git where you can specify. It's a Git. It's Git config core editor.
I specify. Yep. You have to do that every
Yeah.
time you come in, especially if
I
it
do
just
that
brings up
every time
Nano the first
I'm
time.
coming on a machine. I
Yeah.
change it to Vi because I'm like, ugh, why is this so much? Why? Yeah. Meh.
So
Get
you're
rid of it.
starting your lab out with customized this time, and what else are you using? You said you're using Ansible and stuff. So
Yep.
let's see. Let's start at the beginning. So what are you doing first? Are you starting bare metal automation to where you're like pixie booting and then loading a cloud image and then booting your servers now, or is that still kind of
So I haven't gotten
manual?
to pixie booting yet.
Okay.
Most of what I end up doing is I have Ansible that spins up a bare image ISO with a cloud init ISO. And so then I take those two ISOs and I map them to two USB sticks. I plug both USB sticks into the machine. I push the power button.
Gotcha.
And then it comes up with, I have it set up so that it randomly generates the root password and stores that in the Ansible, directory locally so that I can put it into one password. And
So you
then,
have a cloud config and stuff with some of that data that you're doing. So you just plug it in and go.
yeah. So I just plug it in and go. It sets up all of my SSH key trust. So like I don't have to worry about using passwords to log in. It's just all SSH configured.
Gotcha. So that's your first step. So you're doing that. You get all your servers booted up. Then what are you installing on top of it? Proxmox before, but what are you going to do now?
So right now it's going to be Ubuntu 20.04 until I get around to doing Ubuntu 22.04.
Okay.
I want to move to 22.04 just because it's going to be updating, but I'm also kind of limited to what is Platform 9 supporting.
Have you messed around with CentOS or what Rocket now? Have you changed?
I'm not going to go with Rocky Linux. I did CentOS 7 for a while at my last company, and like the challenge I have is like Rocky Linux is still a bit new for me to want to run production infrastructure on it.
Yeah.
And then and the other aspect of it is that CentOS always followed behind RHEL, which was great from a stability perspective. But if you wanted any like new features,
or if your developers want new features,
or if your developers want a newer kernel version, or or Docker happened to fix a bug in Docker Swarm that was due to a kernel patch, and you need that new kernel patch to deploy it. I mean, it's just it's not bleeding edge enough.
Yeah.
For me to want to run a version behind.
So you're running. So you install Ubuntu. You're gonna do 22.04 eventually, and then these are your large machines, and then you're going to get some additional machines you recently purchased. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I went on eBay and I was like, man, I really need some like I want to do this all bare metal. I don't want to have to deal with any virtualization if I can avoid it. And I'm like, but I don't want to dedicate like one of my big iron servers to being my master, because that's an atrocious waste of hardware.
Or have multiple VMs where you've split it up and you're doing that, right? Like,
I mean, the other aspect was as I leave one of my nodes with Proxmox on it and split it up in VMs, but then I have a single point of failure.
Yeah.
Right. If the management plane control virtualization host goes down, then I'm SOL. Because I can't access any of the API servers. And then another aspect of it I looked at, I was like, well, okay, I could do Proxmox across all of my nodes and then cluster it and then get the high availability and that sort of stuff. But then I'm like, well, if I'm doing that and like I don't have like really heavy requirements at home. Like I at most I maybe need 1 or 2 Kubernetes clusters.
You'd rather probably use up all that space for Kubernetes if you can, just so
Yeah,
you can like.
if I can deploy, if I can get it to the point where my only infrastructure requirement is get a Kubernetes cluster up and running, and then once I have the Kubernetes cluster up and running and benchmarked and secured to my heart's content, and then everything else I can manage with a combination of Helm and Customize and Argo, like the idea of like I really want to get to the point where I'm deploying everything with Argo. Like
what's the first thing you're gonna set up with Argo? Like, what are you gonna deploy first?
So my thought is that I'm gonna get my bare metal cluster up, and then I'm gonna join it to.
I'm jumping ahead. Let's go. Yeah. So how many controller nodes are you gonna have?
So I'm gonna have 5 control plane nodes, and I got a really great deal on eBay. So eBay is like my favorite little grocery store for technology. It's like
your Circuit City.
Yeah, like because I want these to be control plane nodes, and because they're going to be control plane nodes, they're not going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting. They're going to be doing API server calls. Maybe they might run some monitoring or logging framework. I'm not sure.
So what kind of hardware specs, right? Like, so like you're doing this for the home lab, but like say you're like a retail front or something like that, and you've got like a little area in the back that you can put stuff up, and you want high availability.
Yeah.
You're doing 5. Why 5? So 5 small, like nuts or something like that kind of.
Intel Celerons 1.8. I think they're like 1.8 gigahertz with 4 cores, 4 threads, and a max of 8 gigs of RAM per node.
All right, and that should be plenty to run the Kube API and everything else that you need, right? Like
it's more than enough to run the Kube API.
So you're gonna run those as your controllers, and then you're gonna have these more dense nodes as your worker nodes.
Yep.
Right,
and so the
idea, how many workers?
Yeah. So the idea. So I've got 3 workers. I may move it to 4 depending on how happy I end up being with Rook and Ceph. So I'm gonna end up. I have actually just sitting right here next to me. Let's see here. Yeah, these 6. I've got 6 2 terabyte solid state drives that are.
You've been preparing.
That I'm going to. So I've got 6 solid state drives, and then I've got more toys too. Where are those?
What are you gonna do with all the speed?
It's all like it's more reliability from a standpoint. I want to get to the point where I don't have rotational disks in my lab.
Well, I had a dumb moment before where it's like I did not realize. I was thinking that the connections for the hot swappables on like front of the DL360s was something like a special connection, right? Because it's in the cage and all that stuff too. And they're like, no, just put some solid states in there. I was like, wait a minute, the connection is different, right? Exact same connection, right? Like, so I quickly updated my server downstairs for the lab to solid states, and it's been amazing, so much faster, right? Like,
yeah, well, I mean, and these aren't NVMe's. They're SATA 6.
Was this a Labor Day sales or what's going on? You find some on sale?
I went on Amazon and I was like, I was toying between between 4 terabyte SSDs and 2 terabyte SSDs, and the difference was like almost like 2.5 times the cost per drive. And
so you'd rather spread that out anyways instead of just having like a couple of 4s. So you got a bunch of 2s.
Yeah. So the idea here is I'm gonna start it out with 3 worker nodes, all which will end up running Rook and Ceph. And these will be 2 of the 6 bays. So I'll have 2, like I've got Dell R610s. They come with 6 bays in the 1U chassis.
So you have 4 terabytes per, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so
was that
so
like
I'll have 2
6 mons.
Yeah, I'll have 2. All of them probably a set of mirrored 256 gig solid state drives for the OS boot disk. And then what I'll do from there on out is I'll probably leave 2 bays empty, and then I'll do 2 bays with the 2 terabytes. So I'll have each will have a pair of 2 terabytes so that I can then do failure domains across servers.
Gotcha.
All right. So
this might even be like overload for like something like edge or on-prem. I guess it's probably better to go solid state just for that speed anyways, and
It's
for the reliability and
from the operational reliability standpoint,
yeah,
is where I look at it. Like, and hard drives are great, but they fail. They're mechanical devices,
a little
and
bit less heat too.
yeah. And so the fun thing about solid state drives is you'll have less vibration, less noise, less uh, potential for mechanical failure. But they're they're limited for as far as the number of writes. So eventually they will fail.
Yeah.
Um, but not for mechanical reasons. So it's but
It's a
in
little bit more
either
predictable, maybe, I guess you could say, right?
maybe
Like,
yeah,
because
maybe more predictable. I'm not, depending on how your write patterns are. Um, but like
which what are your
I'm
right
looking at it from a
patterns?
standpoint of like the likelihood of like one of my solid state disks failing in probably my operational use case is fairly low.
Yeah.
I mean, even with the hard drives, it's fairly low, but the aspect of it is these take less power to operate. They're faster, and they don't have the mechanical failure properties of rotational hard drives.
I think the faster part's the nice thing. Like,
Yeah.
just
So
boot up and actually be able to do stuff. All right, so let's keep going because we've we've spent so much time on the other stuff because it's so interesting. So you've got that set up. All right, you're gonna have solid states. You're gonna have 3 worker nodes. Now what are you gonna be running on those workers? So you're gonna have 5 controllers, 3 worker nodes. Are those worker
yeah.
nodes gonna be dedicated to just Kubernetes, or are you gonna run anything else alongside it?
So my thought is they'll be Kubernetes worker nodes, but they'll run KubeVirt on top.
Okay. So
Um,
what are you running in VMs then? What are you gonna put on KubeVirt?
so on KubeVirt, I'm probably going to put my network controller. So I've got Ubiquity networking gear. So I want to put that into probably a VM on Kubernetes.
Okay.
If not Kubernetes, there is a Helm chart out there for installing the Ubiquity controller software on Kubernetes, which I'm like, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, eventually, when I
uh,
get to that right, 'cause it'll be easier to stay up. And so you're doing obviously doing stuff and Rook. You said basically, so you can
yeah,
do migrations and stuff for the VM if there's an issue with one of the workers. Is that one of the main considerations, or are you
that's one of the
storing other
main.
stuff in there?
Yeah, so one of the main considerations. Another one is that currently my Proxmox server is running my apt-mir,
Okay.
my local apt-mir. It's about 600 gigs in size. Um,
You, you is that for when the internet goes out completely and you still want to do stuff?
it's more for accelerating what I'm doing because
Okay, to make it a little bit faster.
it's a pain in the butt to, like, when you're building images, it's a pain in the butt to download all of those updates.
Yeah,
And because what I do when I build images is I update to the latest patches, and
you're
so
basically
like
getting air gap ready too, right? Like, so if
I'm
everything goes
getting air
down,
gap
you can
ready.
still
Like,
do it. Yeah.
the idea is like eventually what I'll have is I'll have my WireGuard VPN that lets me access one VPN and one machine inside my network, or maybe two, endpoints, like one for my ingress gateway and another for my SSH jump host, which I would need to use in order to do any type of control plane access.
Gotcha. All right, so you've got that set up. So you got Ceph, you got Rook, you're running virtual machines. You're going to be able to migrate them because you're backed by shared storage across the nodes.
Hmm.
All right, what else are you? So you run Kubernetes. So now we can move up to Argo. So what's the first app you're going to run once you get all this running?
So once I get that, actually, what I'm planning on using, I'm planning to use Argo to deploy it. Like, once I get Kubernetes up and running, like even before I install Rook and Ceph, I'm going to connect it to Argo.
Okay.
It's like
So you're gonna
the
you're gonna use that to deploy Rook and then
to deploy
actually
everything.
manage Ceph. Yeah. Okay, that'll be cool. Are you actually going to deploy your clusters with it using Arlon, or have you looked into that yet? Maybe in the future.
It depends
Let me
on.
pop that caption up against ArgoCon, not this weekend, but I think next weekend, right? So let me pop it in the. All
Yeah,
right, go ahead.
it really depends on, like, I haven't explored Arlon yet,
Okay.
largely because our implementation at this point is focused on EKS,
Okay.
and so like for me, I'd have to look for another provider.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I would need either a Bare OS provider, or more ideally, I would love to see a KubeVirt provider. where I could then use Arlon to deploy via KubeVirt hosted on Kubernetes. Which would be kind of fun.
Yeah. All right.
Maybe.
So you're gonna use Argo to basically deploy everything. So you're not managing. So you're Helm charting, or you said you're using Customize. So
I'm
what does
using
that look like? Are you doing like a private GitHub or something like that? Or are you doing a local Git repository to store your manifests, and then you're gonna deploy with Argo that way, or are you
So
hosting it?
I'm doing everything public
Okay.
on that repo that I slacked you. So like all of the repo configuration is going to be living there. And so like the goal is like, what do I need to get an operational cluster? Like and operational for more of from a like a development platform that I can build off of.
Okay.
Like so things like I need to ingress. I want this to provide external DNS capability, because I'm there's some simplifying assumptions that I do. Like I'm not running my own internal DNS server,
Yeah.
just because it's one of those things where like if you do it wrong, it takes down your network. So like I want to use
Your
the
family's like,
extra.
why can't I get to this website? I just
Yeah,
can't get to it, right? Like, or you're running a pie hole or something like that. Why can't I
yeah,
click these ads? Why can't I get tracked? Let me get
right.
tracked.
Like I've run a pi hole on my Kubernetes cluster, and it's fun, but at the same time is like why is this site not working?
Yeah.
And and it's
You
like,
just tell your family 8.8.8.8, right?
yeah. And so like from what I'm using like I have Cloudflare for managing all of my domain names and stuff like that. And so like from an operational standpoint, it just makes sense for me to use it as both my internal and external DNS. I don't see a need to differentiate between the two. So like one of the things I'm going to add into my cluster is the external DNS operator, which adds a CRD that lets that
Bunch of external things.
and a controller that looks for annotations on ingress and service objects, to automatically update my DNS, without me having to go manage it.
Gotcha.
Things like Let's Encrypt. I want to use
So you
that.
can have real domains for Let's Encrypt without using like a
Mm,
host
yeah.
file
Well,
on like your
and so
computer.
the fun thing about using Cloudflare as my external as my both my internal and external DNS is that it allows me to do the DNS-01 challenge instead of the HTTP challenge, so I don't have to
Okay.
worry about having an external site.
Yes.
Um, you know,
Or sitting there just watching it come up when you're doing it and making sure that it actually
mm,
does that. So when it comes up originally, like it shows that in the in Kubernetes, and then it'll go away, and then your real domain will come up, right? Like
mm. Well, and so
being too
there's
vague.
also another aspect too. Is like I've also considered
We'll
possibly
say
running.
DNS-01's faster, right? I mean,
Mhm.
HTTP-01's fast, kind of, but like DNS-01's gonna be faster because something has to come up for HTTP-01.
There's also a secondary advantage to it, is that you don't have to expose your service on HTTP.
Oh, that's true. Yep. But
Um,
you're not sharing the file on 80 so that it can actually test against it. You're
yeah,
just But that
and
means you're showing ownership of the domain instead of ownership of the
you're
like
proving that you have control of the domain,
yeah.
and so then they issue you a cert. So, um, the one of the fun things that enables you to do is like if you've got that if and Cloudflare DNS is cheap. It's like it's free. All of this I'm doing with their free product, and I'm just having them be my registrar. So
Gotcha.
I just have them. I pay my registration fees to ICANN through them, which is like $8 a year, and then I get a fantastic API for managing all of my DNS.
That's pretty nice. Yeah. All right.
Um,
So you've got that set up. We'll see what's moving on next. So what are you actually going to write anything to run on there, or you've already got all the applications and stuff pretty much written, or you're using like third party stuff or stuff
for the
that's
most
already been
part, I'm
written?
using third-party stuff. So I'm like
Gotcha.
spinning up stuff. Like eventually, I may end up like one thing that I want to start working on is I want to move my. I currently have an apt mirror solution that's based on a VM that's using a hodgepodge of deb mirror and apt mirror, to manage it, because nobody can implement there. The people who do implement it correctly work in usually work in both tools. But the people who don't implement it correctly, like one tool or the other will work.
Gotcha.
And so it's like, well, I want to move that into a Kubernetes based app repo mirror so that I don't have to manage a VM for it. Like,
Okay.
I would much rather have that be cloud native so that I can then do things like manage it through using cron jobs on Kubernetes.
So you're going to end up putting it probably in KubeVirt to begin with, and then you want to move it to a container, and then just
Right.
like back that with a volume still in Ceph.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Or maybe like a bucket.
Yeah.
Not a bucket.
I mean, probably a volume because it's going to be easier from a implementation standpoint. Actually, honestly, what I'd probably end up doing is I'd use a CephFS. So I would do NFS share so that I can have the rewrite many without having to worry about hooking up block storage on it.
It's a lot of thought going into a home lab, right? Like, so that's how it actually
It is.
expands into work and stuff. Because are you bringing any of these ideas to work? Like, hey, let's try this. I did this and it
Maybe.
worked in
I
my
mean,
lab. Yeah, maybe.
there's not much I can talk about at the moment on that
Yeah.
front, but like a lot of this is exploratory for using tools that I want to gain familiarity with. So
It's educating your opinions.
It's giving me the background I need to have educated, informed opinions when describing like this is the way.
Gotcha. So I'll move on to my next question, which I think you've kind of answered. So you're testing edge/air gap installs basically for fun, right?
Yeah.
Like, because you're setting up your own mirrors. All right. So I know it's getting a little bit late. So let's move on to the next one. So what are some of the tools you would recommend for users who are trying to automate their infrastructure deployment? So like someone who's just getting started or wants to set up a home lab, what kind of tools would you say to start out with? Like you're customized before Helm,
I mean, as far as getting set up, I mean, like understand the base operating system because all of Kubernetes, all of Docker, everything runs on top of the base operating system. So like my approach to infrastructure is that if I don't have a consistent image that's the same on every single machine, VM, server that I'm deploying, that's causing me pain, right? Like all of my machines should be updated to the same version of the package. They should all update like clockwork.
and that's a lot easier with cloud images, right? Like than it is with just installing off of a CD-ROM or something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. I mean, there's a ton of stuff which is taken from you, but this applies to cloud as well. So like if you're running an Ubuntu image in the cloud, yeah, they'll do a lot of security updates for you, but it's up to you to once you spin that up to build a process that either replaces that image on a regular basis, or with a newer version of that image, or does the care and feeding for it.
So say once you get your tools all set up and everything, what you're going to start doing is deploy everything, break it, and then do it again. Like you're basically going to go in there and delete everything on the worker nodes and see if you can like bring it back up and how fast it can come back up.
I mean,
right? Like,
I have an Ansible playbook at work that I use for spinning up an Amazon, an AWS VPC, an internet gateway, NAT gateway, 2 subnets, one public, one private. So the public one is the only one that you can put internet accessible machines on, and the other one doesn't have any access to the internet except through the NAT gateway. Sets up route tables, sets up security groups, sets up IAM roles so that I can have private IPs shift between machines and have the machines be responsible for doing that without having to give them dedicated credentials. And it spins all this up, and I can say I want 5 worker nodes, 5 control plane nodes, and I say go, and it spins everything up and sets up SSH proxy, sets up Ansible. I have my setups on my machine so that I can do Ansible via SSH proxy.
okay.
So all of my connections to the private subnet go through the SSH proxy, and it proxies the connection to the actual machine. So
you don't have you written your own chaos type thing? You call it Chaos Rye or Chaos Esten?
There are good products out there that do chaos
Yeah.
engineering. There's Gremlin, and then I think there's a couple of open source ones. But like all of this is really just like, how do I build systems?
Yeah.
I can't stress this enough, that the DevOps engineer has to look at it from a systemic approach. Like you need to pick your hardware. Your hardware is going to be the bottleneck, right? As you start, one of the things that I spent, like, on Labor Day, I woke up at like 5 a.m. for some reason. I don't even know why.
Sales.
I wasn't even shopping. And like, but I got up and I'm like, okay, I want to go dig into Ceph. And as I'm digging into Ceph, I'm like, okay, well, the enemy of Ceph is network latency.
Yeah.
Like, if you have any type of network latency, it's going to impact your IOPS.
Slow
And
disks, failing disks, and network latency.
but yeah, network latency is the biggest one, though.
Yeah.
You can have slow disks,
They'll
but
eventually be consistent. Yeah.
but even those slow disks will be faster than your network if there's any latency.
Yeah.
And so the idea is, like, as I'm looking at this, I'm gonna do some benchmarking of my network interfaces and my network stack configuration and the hard drives that I'm putting into this, so that I get an understanding of how are these things performing before I
So
start building on top of them.
we skipped networking. We didn't even ask what kind of networking do you have set up at, like 1 gig, 10 gig? What are you doing
So
for
far
home?
it's gigabit,
Gigabit.
but I've been contemplating introducing 10 gigabit.
Fine, you go right up to 40. Like, what are you doing? I'm just kidding.
Expensive.
Very expensive, yes.
If work will buy it for me, I will do it.
Oh, you would definitely use it if you could get one. Like, maybe in the next like 5 years, you'll start seeing those show up on eBay for a little bit cheaper, right? But then even the
Yeah.
cabling can be kind of expensive, right? Like moving over
Well, exactly.
optical.
You're looking at all of the cabling and all of the management, and so, like, and the other aspect of it is the question of, for my use case, is it necessary?
Yeah.
Right.
Not yet. I mean, eventually, if you start figuring out your network's too slow for Ceph.
But that's one of the things, is like, I need to understand what that performance is of what my existing hardware is before I can make that educated decision on, like, do I invest in 10 gig?
See, as your devices start getting like the new iPhone, bigger and bigger cameras, and those files get bigger and bigger, and your family starts saying, "Why is this taking so long to upload?" And then, like, where's it going? You can be like, "Okay, we need a faster network locally, I guess."
Well, but again, at the same time, like, Wi-Fi 6 won't exceed gigabit connections,
Gotcha.
right? And so, like, that's,
I mean,
if
I'm
you're
sure
not hooked to the wire, your limiting factor is going to be that Wi-Fi.
you don't have Lightning to Ethernet cables like hooked up so that your family can upload pictures eventually. Okay,
I don't have any iPhones.
there you go. Yeah. Well, the pixels and stuff too are getting there. So let's go. Okay, so ArgoCon's coming up. So obviously you've been looking at and using Argo a lot. Are you excited? You think it's a year of Argo? I mean, I'm sure people have been using it before and everything as well, but like, are you more excited?
I enjoy Argo. It's a fun tool, the little bit that I've been able to play with. It's very powerful from a standpoint of being able to do continuous validation that your declared state is what you wanted it to be.
Yeah. I've got a question real quick too from BJ on YouTube. So said, Esten, I want to learn to set up Ansible through SSH proxy. Do you stream or blog?
I do.
So he streams. So sometimes he'll stream on the platform 9, which maybe we'll get that set up and then start promoting it. And maybe we could make that one of the next ones if you're interested. But you also have a blog.
Yeah. So I have a blog. It's esten.ry.ninja.
Let me put that up too, just so you can have it. So esten.ry.ninja. Yeah. All right. Let me make sure it's right. Let me show it. This is where some of his. All right. Is that right? Does that look right to you?
Where did you drop it in Slack?
Oh no, it's on the stream.
Oh, I gotta go look at the captions. There we are. Yes.
All right, there it is. So he's got some information there about it. But then
I haven't written this. I haven't written the SSH proxy stuff, but I can probably build a quick example for that. Actually, one of the fun things about it is that it's very easy to do. It's all you have to do is really add one variable to your to your to the groups. So the way I have it structured is I have my SSH proxy in one Ansible group, and then I have all of my nodes that I'm configuring in a separate nodes group, and then I add a connection variable. And actually, I can probably let's see here. Where's that? I'll write this up. I'll make a point to write this up on the blog and get it up on and get it out there. But
So if it's of a lot of interest too, we can throw it on our platform blog too if you want.
But the key is that you set up your SSH options in Ansible so that when Ansible makes the SSH connection, it's using those options, and then the other aspect that you need to take into account is setting up your SSH config settings such that it passes your SSH agent credentials across to the nodes in the private subnet.
Awesome.
There's actually there's actually a couple really good articles out there that I came across that I used to leverage it. So I'll try and write that up.
I'm sure you'll be streaming soon too. Like we'll talk about it. We'll figure out like a stream date because I want to hop on with Esten and actually look at the GitHub stuff that we were posting. Maybe go a little bit more in depth. So maybe we'll do that in the next like week or two. So we'll put information, and then it'll be on YouTube and it'll be on Twitch when we stream that. So if you're following us on YouTube, you'll be able to see that. So you can follow, subscribe.
So BJ had a follow-up question to that. Why do you? He's curious why you think we don't see more people using Ansible. I see a lot of people using Ansible. It's I guess my question is if you don't see a lot of people streaming with Ansible, and I guess most of the time it's not sexy.
Well, it's like, where does Terraform start and then where does Ansible begin, right? Like, so a lot of people like show off Terraform and they're like deploying the infrastructure and doing all that, but then Ansible is how you're going to start configuring it, right? Like, so I guess that's maybe they stop there before they get to that. Or
honestly, for me, it comes like I like Terraform as a tool. It's useful, especially if you are in a cloud first environment. It's really great. But where it starts to fall apart for me in my use cases is that Terraform doesn't do a really good job of managing on-prem and bare metal infrastructure. It's not an ideal tool for it, and it's largely because nobody writes providers for dealing with bare metal, because you have an infinite number of BMCs and motherboard manufacturers and hardware manufacturers. The idea of using Terraform on bare metal was just like, no, absolutely no.
I did use a libvirt provider, but that's about it. I think that's about as far as I got. It took me a little bit to get it working.
Yeah,
but that's
so. And like on that note is like, there are some providers out there, but again, like my biggest beef with that is that like it's the same beef I have with Ansible, and name your favorite infrastructure as code provider here. The tool is only as good as the community that surrounds it.
And like some of the Terraform provider information is very lackluster in the documentation too. You're like, wait, what do they mean here? And like you're guessing sometimes. I think that's the thing I ran into with like libvirt.
I mean, yeah, and I've run into that a lot of times with Terraform too, and I've run into like undocumented bugs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I've run into the same type of things with Ansible as well. So I'm not gonna poo-poo on either one of them for that. But what I found that I like with Ansible is that with one stack, I can manage both the infrastructure, like the actual bare metal infrastructure in it, and the actual configuration of that infrastructure. And so like what it comes down to in my mind is deciding where you're going to spend your cognitive load, right? In a previous organization I worked at, we had a combination of Terraform, Chef, Ansible. We did some PowerShell automation. We did, like there was a bunch of different things. And eventually what we decided is that we wanted to start moving away from Chef because we were having trouble hiring for it.
Yeah.
And that's always a big question in my mind, is like, can I hire people to work on this?
So we had like a big split between like Puppet, Chef, and then Salt came along, and then Ansible, like I guess Red Hat picked it up and it became even more popular. So maybe more people are. Well, so BJ, what do you see more of then, right? Like if you don't see Ansible, what are you often seeing information about? Like Salt? obviously pronounced Salt, but like Chef or Puppet or just Terraform? Was that the question? Like I'm seeing Terraform everywhere, but not Ansible. And while we wait for that, since we're going a little bit over time, and I'm sure you might have other stuff to do eventually. Is there anything else you want to say, or you going to any conferences soon, or are we gonna be able to see you live somewhere?
So yeah, I'm gonna go into KubeCon. I've been trying to work on finding time to get back on stream and start poking around my lab. But like, I think probably the biggest thing that I'm waiting for is my new hardware to arrive next week.
I'll say once you get that in, let me know, and I'll hop on there with you too. Now that I got the new streaming setup, I got to use it.
Yeah.
Plus, I can add
so
some commentary for you, maybe. I'll be there
yeah,
talking
so
head.
like the fun thing about that is that I'm looking at it from a standpoint of like, how am I going to get this up and running? Like the other thing about it is that I bought consumer grade hardware for this.
Yeah.
Like these are small little NUC type machines. They're not like big beefy servers. They're tiny machines. They have a SATA 3 hard drive port in them.
So did you pick these over pies just because pies aren't going to give you what you need, right? Like they're not going to give you enough.
I picked these over pies because I can get these.
That's true too. Yeah. Let's see. Do another question. Register on your platform. I'm not sure what you mean like the oh, see, here's BJ too. He hasn't seen a ton of content on either. Maybe don't know where to look. Yeah, so like on Twitch and stuff, if you're watching, like there's sometimes they've made a new software development channel instead of just science and technology. Science and technology is going to have a lot of stuff around like Ansible and maybe some cloud stuff. I think that's where most of the people are streaming for that. But then like YouTube is probably just going to be your best bet. Just searching directly for that, like Ansible guides and like getting started with Ansible, getting started with Terraform and that kind of stuff. Like there's some good stuff out there if you're looking to watch a video. Obviously, there's a lot of good documentation if you want to spend time reading. But
yeah, as far as on YouTube, I mean, if you're looking for really good Ansible content, Gearling Guy is probably the best. He has an entire series that he walks through his book on how to get started with Ansible, where he walks through each lesson on a YouTube video and like walks you through all the steps, and he has really great content. He's got a lot of really good information on embedded systems and Raspberry Pis, and he does a lot of work with compiling the Raspberry Pi kernels, and he's been doing a lot of really interesting stuff as it relates to playing with the Raspberry Pi Compute 4 modules and using their PCI Express slot. Yeah. You can't say Ansible without Gearling, right? Yeah. His content is fantastic. He's on my short list of subscriptions. In addition to a couple of other like more left leaning political news subscriptions.
All right, so since we're about like 20 minutes over time, let's go ahead and like wrap it up, Esten. Thanks everyone for joining. Join us at ArgoCon September 19th through the 21st, 2022 in Mountain View. We'll be there. We'll be talking about Arlon.
And if you're coming to KubeCon in Detroit in October, that's the 25th through the 28th. We'll both be there. We'll be at the booth. Come in, say hi. And if there's things you want to see in the lab, let me know.
Yep. And join us on Slack. So slack.platform9.io. And if you want to reach out to me directly, I'm on there. So is Esten, but here's mine. I'll have to put a caption for you next time, Esten.
Yeah, mine's at Esten Rye. I'm very original.
Reach out to either of us if you've got questions or if you want to start your journey with Kubernetes using Platform 9. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for the questions, BJ and others. And thank you for joining us. We'll be back again live next week. I'll try to get more information about going live with Esten. Maybe we can do a technical stream that'll be a little bit longer. That'll just be on Twitch and YouTube, and that'll actually share a screen and show you some technical stuff.
Yeah.
But thanks everybody for joining. You want to say bye, Esten?
Yeah. Thank you guys for joining. I love the questions, and again, please reach out if you got more ideas or questions or want to ask me more about my lab. I'm happy to talk.
Yep.